afternoon, 24-hour power party people. Too many P's in one phrase for me to deliver it correctly, it would seem. It's the bank holiday over here in the UK, or at least it just was, so I'm going to blame it on that. Anyway, how is everyone getting on? I am indeed Tim, the brand weaver, and you are listening to Branding for Breweries, the podcast that brings you the best, brightest, and biggest brains in the brewing industry. Ooh, more alliteration that was unplanned, to help your brewery thrive and survive. And today, as always, is no exception, because I am reaching out to my friends beyond the pond, or indeed across the pond, and I have brought to you the very talented, very intelligent, and very enigmatic Amanda Bruns. Not Burns, as we have established previously that other people have said. What can I say about Amanda? She has one of the coolest titles that I've read on LinkedIn, as she goes by chaos coordinator, relationship theorist, and beer industry consultant. So when you combine the three of those, you get a really exciting combination of knowledge. And this is why I've asked Amanda onto the show to talk to us today, because Amanda is going to help us to unpick the twisted, knitted ball of complications of being passionate about brewing, but then actually turning that into a brewery that makes profits. Two very different things. So I'm going to shut up. And I'm going to welcome Amanda to the stage. And everyone, as you always do, give her that wonderful round of applause that, of course, she can't hear because we don't actually get any sound from an audience. Amanda! Hey, bud!
Hi, Tim. Thank you so much for having me. I'm going to ask that you just follow me around and narrate everything for me from now on. That was the best introduction I could ask for.
Maybe I've got a side project there. I can just like be the hype man with a megaphone just following everyone around. I could do that. I think that's possible.
I think you'd be good at it.
Amanda, but thank you so much for joining me today. This has been on the cards for a while now, but there have been various events and bits and bobs going on, not only in the UK, but your neck of the woods as well. But I'm glad it's happening, because this is going to be great. It has got to be a subject that is close to the heart of many of the listeners to this show, about, you know, being passionate is one thing, but taking it the next step even, or combining the word step and level, as I tried to do there, is something which is challenging. So before we get stuck into that, Amanda, for those who may not know who you are, what you do, where you come from, would you mind giving us a bit of background about yourself, my dear, please?
Absolutely. Well, like I said, thank you all so much for having me. So excited to be here. Big fan of the show, but I've tooted your own horn enough. So my name is Amanda Bruns. I am the founder and chaos coordinator at Ale Advised. It's a beverage consulting firm. I come from over a decade of both nonprofit and beer experience. So I was able to do a lot with very little money. So that really helped me in the beer world. No one's buying a boat here, right? But yeah, so I just get to live my dream every day, working with people who are passionate, today's topic, and who are creative and innovative and just want to be here. It's refreshing every day. It's new every day. So I just could not ask for better.
Awesome. And yeah, very succinct intro. Thank you very much, because this now means we get to dig into the juicy stuff, right? As you say, you've got this wonderful opportunity to work with those brewers who are so very passionate. But there are many passionate brewery owners and brewers out there who struggle to turn that into something that represents sales. Where do you think they're going wrong?
Well, I think there's a couple of different things. I think especially several years ago, when people realized that breweries can make money, people that weren't necessarily business savvy were getting brewery loans, and they thought, this is great. I can just, instead of just home brewing, I can brew professionally now, and it's the same thing. Unfortunately, it's not. You do have to make money to stay afloat. So they were kind of focused on, here's me, here's my hobby, here's what I love, here's my passion. And that's great, but you have to know how to share that with people. And part of that is how you brand yourself, how you provide a taproom experience, if you provide a taproom experience. If you're just distributing, how do you make sure that your story gets told? There's a lot of layers there, and I think that's where people go wrong. Is your passion is your why, right? That's what gets you up every day. That's what helps you when that burnout happens. But your branding, that storytelling, that's your how, and that's how you're going to make your profits. And I think a lot of people just stop short, and a lot of people don't know what they don't know. You know, a lot of people don't bring in the people that are more business savvy. They don't want to share their creativity. They don't know how to trust their employees. So it's really about trying to bridge that gap between passion and business. And when you can do that, or when you can even start to do that, that's where I think you can actually start to make that profit while still being able to do the thing you love.
Yeah. It makes so much sense, and it's something that I preach, and I bang the drum. You know, we kind of shout the same thing from different parts of the world ultimately. But the brewers, or some of the brewers that I've met, they're clearly passionate about brewing, creating great liquid, and not so passionate about what we call branding or marketing or those other business, you know, shout about what you're good at elements. So how do we bridge that gap and convert their passion for brewing into a passion for storytelling and sharing what they love?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think the first thing that you have to do is look at that why. You know, why am I doing this? Why do I care? I mean, because we wouldn't be here if we didn't care about our industry. We wouldn't be here if we didn't care about our job. Like I said, even if you're making profits, very few people are out there buying boats. Very few people got into beer because they're like, you know what, I want to be a billionaire. Most of us got into it because we didn't have a choice, right? Like we wake up every day and this is what we love. And it would be ignoring a part of ourselves if we did anything else. So you got to start there. You know, why am I doing this every day? Why do I care? And then that's kind of how you determine what and how you share. You know, I tell a lot of my people, like, what are you talking about with your buddies? How are you telling your story when you're just drinking and there's no pressure? You're not calling it business. You're just calling it your story. That's where you start. So if you're, you know, if you're excited about this new, I refuse to use an IPA as yet another example. If you are excited that you have an amber ale and no one else around you has a good amber ale, I'm gonna get so much flack for using that too, but
Come at me, bro. Let's go.
right. So like it's like that's what you focus on. You know, tell people about this amber ale you're super excited about. Tell them that you put. I'm gonna use my own example of an amber ale I did. Say that you put pomegranate and honey in your amber ale and say why. Like that was a story I got to tell a year and a half ago. And that was something I was so excited about. And that's something I could put on social media. That's something that I could train the staff at the brewery about. Here's my story. So then they could tell my story. So then the consumers got excited because they felt like they were in the know. Because it was a very personal story for me. It wasn't just like, hey, I think here's another amber ale. And so, like, if that's what you're telling your friends, lean into that. If you are super passionate about a certain kind of music, and maybe that's what you play in your brew house, have at least a night where you invite your consumers in and you're like, this is what I play in the brew house. Here's what I brewed to it. You know, kind of have that theme, invite them into your story. This isn't about you, it's about selling yourself, but it's less about that, about the selling and more the yourself.
Mm.
If you are yourself with your consumers, you will find your niche. And that's even true for people that don't love consumer facing roles. I know lots of those. I've worked with lots of breweries like that. And honestly, they're making some of the best content now because they stopped going the traditional route of we have to have XYZ in the algorithm to make it work. And they went, what do I care about? Well, I care about the fact that I play metal music in the tap room and we just made this like insane farmhouse ale and now we're going to have a metal night to celebrate the fact that it's being released and we're going to hype it up and we're actually getting the brewer involved. So it's just examples like that of how do you tell your own story when it's just you? Because if you do not care, your consumers are not going to care.
Mm. I mean, metal music and farmhouse ale, like you're ticking my boxes now, dude. I'd
Oh,
be all over that.
it's
Magnificent.
wonderful.
So in my mind, I'm thinking you're gonna have brewers, brewery owners who are passionate about something, but maybe there's kind of a lump in their throat where they're like, no one's gonna want to hear about that. That's not actually an exciting or interesting thing. Like, how do you work with those kind of brewers and brewery owners who go, well, no, people do want to hear it?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's we all have to get out of our own heads sometimes and out of our comfort zone. So usually I just kind of put the challenge up of make one post, just one. Just one that you think you're excited about that you don't think anyone else would. Some of the highest, like, engagements that I've seen are some of the simplest posts. I was working with a brewery that started doing brunch, and we were all just standing around in the kitchen before service, and they pulled out this beautiful pan of bacon. It was sizzling, it was beautiful, and we were all like, "Man, that's music, like, listen to that, the smells." We took a video of it just for fun, just for us, because we're like, "Man, like, this is money." And we talked the owner into posting it, and I got people there for brunch. I mean, it's bacon. It did a lot of the heavy lifting, I'll admit, but
Sure.
but it's just silly stuff like that of, like, the moments behind the scenes. You just gotta take the risk and say, "This was interesting to us." It might not always work. I mean, you do
Mm,
have to look at it through certain lenses. I mean, make sure it's not offensive, make sure that it's not, too raunchy, make sure I mean, you have to check yourself. But silly little things like that is just so connecting to your audience. It makes you accessible. It makes
mm,
you stand out. And even if it's something so simple as, "Oh, they like bacon, I like bacon, now I want bacon." It sometimes can be that simple outreach moment where you get someone at the right time, they resonate with what you're doing, and then they start paying attention to you. And again,
mm,
it doesn't have to be every post. You don't have to stress about every post. It doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to be real. People can sense when you're not being authentic. And there's honestly, to be blunt about it, you can't risk not being authentic now. You can't risk losing profits. And if you're losing profits trying to be someone that you're not, that's on you, you know? I would rather lose my company because people didn't like who I was than me trying to be somebody else and failing at being someone else. So,
mm,
keeping that in mind of would you rather put something out there, and I know it's scary because you are putting yourself out there. It does feel a lot more personal. But would you rather risk getting people to like you and affiliate with your tap room because of something deeply personal that they resonate with and you found your people? Or do you wanna spend the rest of your career starting to get burnt out and start hating what you're doing because you're not being authentic? I think that has really been the question that has turned a lot of my clients to go, "Okay, I'll risk it." And maybe it works, maybe it doesn't. Maybe we just try it again that week, but becoming accessible, being authentic, it does pay off.
mm. Love that. And earlier on, you talked about obviously if you're not passionate about your brewery, you can't expect your consumers to get
Mhm.
passionate from it. And in the past, I know you've talked about like kind of the a brewery's energy comes from the top down. So it's not just the consumer, is it? It's the rest of the staff in the building. Is that correct?
Absolutely. I mean, if you don't if you don't set the tone or if you set the incorrect tone, you cannot expect your consumers to be excited about what you're doing. Now, yes, especially years ago, you could hole up in your office, in your brew house, do your own thing, and as long as you were making stellar beer, it kind of didn't matter, or it mattered less, because that's what people were there for. Now it's so much more about the experience. I've been lucky enough to work with Secret Hopper and Craft Beer Professionals, and they've done years and years of data showing the consumer needs that full experience. It's not just good beer. Obviously, that has to be there, but it's the full experience. So if you've got an owner, for example, that I mean, I think we've all seen them, or we've seen them on shows like Bar Rescue, or we can still picture it regardless. That brewery owner that's sitting at the end of the bar, just kind of drinking with their friends and not really engaging, not really doing the education of this is the beer, this is why we're excited. You leave the staff kind of on your own. That opens them to burnout. It opens them to lack of excitement, because if you're not excited about your product, why should they be? Especially again, I keep going back to this is not a billionaire's industry. There are exceptions, but your staff are there to make money, yes, but they can be your best storytellers. So if you get them excited, they're going to be excited to tell the consumer. If you don't give them that education, if you don't give them that excitement, then they're simply selling a product. And your consumer is not there just for a product anymore. They're there for the story and they're there for the experience. So if you've got a employee who is super excited, they come in their first day, they're like, I love beer. What's the story? You can kill that excitement so easily if you don't water that. On the flip side, if you come in and you're like, hey, I brewed this or our brewer did this and I'm so excited about it. Here's the story, or here's a punny name that we're going to call it. Here's what you need to know about the consumer. And you're lifting your employees up and you are empowering them. You are rewarding their creativity and feeding into that. That's going to come full circle. That is going to be your environment. That is going to be your vibe, and it's contagious. Consumers can feel that. Consumers can taste that. It's, I think we underestimate consumers sometimes. Sometimes we overestimate, don't come for me. But I think we do underestimate them in that so many people I've talked to have said, we'll walk in and walk right back out of a tap house or a tap room if it doesn't feel good. They can sense that. So you create the vibe, you create that environment. And there's a lot of ways to do that. I know I worked with a brewery that did kind of a fun, if you know, you know. There is a beer called FBFS. I won't go into exactly what it stands for, but the first brew day, I'll give you the first two letters, of that particular beer was really, really rough. Really rough. We could hear the rest of what that means from the front of the brewery. Uh, so that's what they named it. They did the acronym, but if you knew, you knew. And they turned a really negative experience into this really fun name and story. And people were curious. They're like, what does that stand for? And they would tell them for first brew day blank. And everyone would get a good giggle, and it was a little offensive. There definitely were curse words in there, and everyone got a good laugh. And it turned this really negative experience into a community building. Everyone got a behind the scenes sneak peek. And even though it was not a good experience, everyone could laugh about it. Everyone bonded over that. And then your community feels like, oh, not everything's perfect, but I'm in on it and I get to kind of see behind the curtain. So you can take moments like that or moments where you don't want to be involved. Our brewer did not want to be on camera, but that was kind of his contribution of like, okay, here's my bridge, here's my story. So it can be creativity like that. Like you don't have to just be all smiles. You don't have to just be this fake, like, hey, everything's great. We've never ever had a bad brew day in our entire life, because that's a lie. I don't care who you are. If you've been in business more than like 24 hours, you've had a bad brew day.
Dude, I think we've got some people who are listening on Instagram Live, and they're saying the same thing. Like a big part of it is the vibe, it's the success, the energy that comes from the bar. So what you're saying rings true with the audience today, Amanda. But the question I've got after hearing that story is like there has to be a little trigger in the mind, even at the point of going, okay, that is negative, but we can turn this into something good. There is that, but let's think about the next step. Or I must remember to tell the front of house about this exciting thing and stuff. How do you help brewery owners and brewers to kind of get into that process and that pattern of going, be thinking about this, or when this happens, always think about this?
Yeah, so I think it comes down to communication. A lot of what I do is internal communication. It is that internal organization of how do we tell that story? I come from relationship theory, so that's really, really important to me is how people interact and making sure that those foundations are really strong. So to answer that question, I look at it like kind of that pipeline. If you can just continue that, that's going to be successful. So your point of contact, maybe it's the brewer, usually. says, okay, this is what I have brewed and this is what I'm excited about. That can be a internal Slack channel. That can be a whiteboard. That can be a meeting. I usually don't push those because nobody likes a meeting that could have been an email or a Slack message. Sometimes they're necessary though, but whatever works for your brew to make that next step. But you need to be able to say, here is the product, here is its story, and then you need to be able to check, is this brand voice? I think that, and someone's going to come for me, I think brand voice is more important than branding, especially when you're getting started. So you need to create values statements. You actually need to write those down. You need to share those with your staff. And you need to make sure that they're aware of what those are so that they can be your checkpoint every step of the way. Now, I know that brewers don't always get to just make what they want to make. You have to listen to the market. But if you are a lager house and you just cannot stand IPAs, that is not who you are, don't make them. Find another niche in the market. Find a different thing to make that appeals to your greater market. I mean, I know that's a really basic example, but if you are if someone comes to you about a fundraiser, for example, you need to be able to look at that and go, am I open to anything in the public eye, or is this just unfortunately not something we can stand behind? And so those are quick examples of step one. And that, like I said, goes back to the product itself, anything else you're doing. When the brewer then says, here's what we've made, here's what's exciting about it, then your staff, maybe it's your managers, but your staff needs to take that. They need to process that against your value statements and say, yes, I understand how I'm doing this. They need to ask questions. But people don't know what they don't know. So you need to be providing that information. You can't expect your staff, especially newer ones to the beer industry, to know what to ask. So be there for them, be their teacher. I kind of think of it like a parent. You don't need to handhold adults' hands, but sometimes in their infancy in the beer world, you do. You need to teach them who you are, teach them your values, so they'll grow up strong in it. I know that's leaning into the metaphor a little hard, but I do think it stands. So then when your staff does that, then the managers can do that with the staff, whatever you need to do. You need to also link in any of your kitchen staff or back of house. Hopefully you've done that alongside the beer. Hopefully you've said this is what pairs well with it. This is what you need to recommend with it. But at some point loop them in. Have the staff talk to the kitchen and say, how are we telling this story with the menu? What are we doing with this together? That way, when you are facing your customer, sure, there may be questions you can't answer, but you know how to answer it in the brand voice. Even if it's, I don't know, but here's how we typically handle things like that, or here's our story. When it is so ingrained and it continues with every product, then it's no longer a conscious thing. Your staff has picked up your story and they are telling it as if it's their own and they're adding to it. And when your entire staff becomes your story, that's when you can trust them. That's when you can know that you're doing a good job. That's when those profits start coming in because your consumer wants to be a part of your story. They see that and they see that trickle down and they understand who you are and what you stand for. And if it's something they resonate with, they become your people. You become their tap room. And I'll tell you, some of those regulars are the fiercest, most loyal customers I have ever seen. They are going to be your best brand ambassadors next to your staff. So it's really that pipeline of telling your story. And then, like I said, when your consumers are like, these are my people. Word of mouth, you can't buy that. You can't pay enough money for that. So when they're out on the street saying, oh hey, my mother is having her 60th birthday party, but I know these people and they're going to be so welcoming. I want to be part of their story, but I want them to be part of mine. They're going to bring their family. They're going to think about you for those moments in their lives that they are not going to forget. And you are going to be cemented in that. Even if they don't go on social media, that is going to resonate. They're going to share that. So it's really just about making sure that you know who you are and you can share that with other people and you get other people excited.
I love that, and I do agree when you say about well, you called it brand language. I think it's like the brand messages, then kind of the purpose, the vision, the mission. But if you have that like locked in, then you can have a brewer who's can just wax lyrical, confidently, passionately about what they love and why they think it's great, and you almost pass it through the brand filter.
Mhm.
Right, so it
Absolutely.
aligns with what your brewery is. So it no longer just becomes what the brewer is talking about, but it's what the brewery is talking about. And then, as you say, on the other side, you've got the consumer who is drawn to that, and they become your people, they become your tribe. Grandma, great grandma, she's getting whipped out for a 70th, 80th birthday bash and just loving that farmhouse ale that you're producing. So it makes perfect sense. And I love the way that you painted that picture. But earlier on, you talked about like one of your examples and a brewer just being like, yeah, I want to talk about this, but don't put me on camera. Like I think, well, again, I know there are a lot of one person, two person band breweries out there, and neither of them are going, I ain't putting my face on camera. I'm not doing this. I know everyone says put your face on there, be authentic, be your true self, but it's just not happening. Like I'm not of the generation, I don't have the confidence. But they've still got to create content. They've still got to get faces out there. How can you overcome that confidence barrier? Are you forcing them to do it, or are there other ways to do it?
No, absolutely not forcing them. Because I think to your point, like being authentic, sometimes that is an absolutely no, like dead stop, not doing it. It wouldn't be me. There's a couple of different ways. First of all, if especially if you're a smaller brewery and you absolutely just are not doing it, you're not comfortable, fine. That comes across. Don't be nervous because your consumers are then going to be nervous. They're like, what's wrong? Is it the quality? Like, do you have bugs crawling around? Like, do you know what an IPA is? Things like that. So you want to build confidence. So lean into what you are confident about. If you don't want to show your face, fine. But are you confident in your beer? Show the beer, even if it's just your hand pouring a beer. You don't need to be a hand model to be able to pour a beer. And no one should be looking that. I'm sure there are, but your standard consumer is going to be focused on the beer, and man, that looks good, and man, that would be really good on an afternoon like this. So you can do little steps like that. The other thing that you can do is focus on who you're serving. Get your regulars to pose with the beer or the food. I mean, ask them, of course, get their permission, but show people in your tap room enjoying your experience. That is sometimes as powerful, more powerful, and it still tells your story. Hand it to your staff. If you have a staff member that's willing to be on camera, lean into that. The other thing that you can do, one of the breweries that I worked with, they were comfortable being on camera, but there were things that they were not confident in with themselves. So they created a persona. It's this ridiculous character. They put on a wig. They have like this velour jumpsuit. They just really lean into it. And anybody that knows them doesn't always get to see the silly side. They know it's there. They don't always get that because you get the chef
Mhm.
personality. So getting to see him do this and be on there, it gives him the confidence to be silly, to kind of be absolutely ridiculous. It makes people tune in, and then they get to go, oh well, I know him, and oh, I get to see this side of him and really relate. So you can do things like that, and then because of that, because it's not you, you can absolutely push the boundaries. Like I said, they've just done really ridiculous things with it. He does a voice, the whole nine. So you can get creative. Like, but if you're just absolutely not comfortable, that's totally fine too. Try to work up to it. You can do even a still shot, a photo of you of meet the brewer or meet the owner at some point when you're there, when you're comfortable. But like I said, build up. Start with product, see if your staff will be on camera, see if your consumers will be on camera. And most of them, most of your regulars would love to be on social media. They would love to have their picture out there. And they're most likely going to share that too and be like, oh, look, I was on so and so's Facebook, I was on so and so's Instagram. Look at me, I'm a star. And get to flaunt that to their friends. Well, that's a share. That's
Mm.
engagement, and then you get their people. So that can be a great tactic, even if you are comfortable being on camera or on photo or whatever. So again, it's just taking what you're comfortable with and what's true to yourself, and then figuring out how to be creative with it. It's just like, the question of, should I allow kids in the tap room? Should I have TVs in the tap room? You have to figure out what fits your brand voice. And like you said, you can kind of put it through that filter. So not everyone has to do the same thing, and that's the great part of it. Like when you're authentic to yourself, you get to be creative, and then again, your consumer really responds.
That point about people getting tagged in photos, or them being almost like the unofficial ambassador at the time, I've spoken to people about this before as well. The more you can generate things that make people talk about your brewery on your behalf, the better, because then if someone sees someone else talking about your brewery, it doesn't feel like you're selling or you're marketing, because your name is in there by association. You're not the one putting the messages out there. So I think that's a really, really valuable point. The more people you can get tagged in and them going, hey, look, Mom, I'm with the beer, then it's win-win across the board. Okay, so let's try and make this a bit actionable for those listening now or later. So say you spend a bit of time, you know what you're passionate about as a brewery. What are the steps? Like where do we start injecting that? Is there like a tick list of places you need to be considering? How do you bring that passion to life? How do you communicate it? Like, what's the plan there?
Yeah, I mean, I think the steps can look different as far as your timeline, where you are, who you are as a brewery, whether you're distributing, all those different factors. But the through line remains that, first of all, you have to know your story. That's something I work with my clients all the time about, is, like I said, creating those value statements. My favorite thing to do, it's such a silly exercise in execution, like you feel kind of childish doing it, but it's so effective, is making those little word clouds that some of us got to make in school as a kid, where it's like, here's a word, here's what I associate with it, here's what I associate with that, and you just go crazy and brainstorm. Do that with your brand voice. That takes so much pressure. Go, what do I associate with myself? What do I associate with my beer? And just kind of go crazy. That will help you then pare down to what your brand voice is, what you really do think matters. Once you have that kind of value statement, then everything you do, you can run through that. You can go, okay, what is my communication style? Am I engaged? Am I doing this? And no matter where you are in the planning stage, that's kind of your North Star. You have something, kind of your own little mini playbook to report back to keep you honest, to say, am I doing the right thing? And also don't do it alone. I mean, you've got family, you've got friends, you have people like myself who are so willing to have these conversations to say, who are you and what are you doing? And also don't be afraid to make mistakes. I mean, as long as it's real, put it out there. I mean, again, like I said, don't be offensive. Don't just throw out memes. I have seen breweries that only communicate in memes. Like, throw a little bit of yourself in there, but don't be afraid to be silly. Don't be afraid to fail. We learn by failure, and I know, especially in this industry right now, it's so scary to think I might not turn profits right away. I have to hurry up and X, Y, Z. No, you don't. No, you don't. You need to stop and figure out what it is you want, who it is you are. Once you have that, like I said, you can check everything against it. That can inform your hiring process. Are they going to uphold your values? You can kind of make your communication style off of that. And then when it comes down to even time for merch, or do I do a mug club, or what kind of glassware do I do? Do I do traditional? Do I want to go absolutely funky? Do I want all of my glassware to be shaped like acoustic guitars? I don't know. Like, everyone's got their thing. And even down to, do we sell cocktails? Do we sell hemp derived beverages? That way, when you have those questions, again, you just refer to, am I being authentic? Am I upholding my value statement? And I know it's not as simple as it sounds, right? Like it seems like, oh, easy peasy, just XYZ, check the boxes. And we all know it's not. But this is all an industry where we're learning together. So bring people in, like I said, bring people in that will call you on that. I have some wonderful friends who, if I'm like, maybe I should have gone in this direction, they're like, why? Why are you doing that? Like, does it check your boxes? And then I get to go, hold on, no, it doesn't. And I get to do that for them. So I think that that's really the key. And just like I said, being creative, being authentic. And I know that, again, I know that sounds so vague, but when you're checking yourself against yourself, like you're gonna succeed. You just
Mm,
are. And I mean, no, again, like maybe you're not buying a boat, and yes, maybe your value statement when you check it, you're saying, I'm not upholding this. I need to bring in an accountant.
mhm,
Sometimes that does mean I'm not upholding, I need to bring this in, but that does inform that decision. So instead of going, "Oh my god, I need to bring in a social media consultant because I have no idea what I'm doing." Well, start with it first. Did I try to uphold these values? Well, no, I'm having trouble with it. Okay, now it's time to bring someone in that knows a little better than me, can guide me. But again, that kind of tells you which consultant to bring in. It's not just, oh, this is the highest rated and I'm going to throw money at them. It's, oh, this person will uphold my brand, my values. They know what they're doing. So again, if you just have your North Star and you continue down that path and you ask yourself the right questions and you're honest with yourself, but you do have to be authentic with yourself too.
mm.
That's that's going to lead you down the right path. You're going to find your right people. And honestly, like, yes, things are hard right now. I'm not going to say like you will absolutely always succeed all the time, but at least then, if you find yourself stumbling, at least you were authentic. At least like, I was myself, I gave this my all. And again, I would rather have that than regret wondering, what if I was myself? What if I just gave it everything I had and was true to myself? So, but people do resonate. So, I don't mean to leave it on a down note. People do resonate. You find your people. Even the weird ones. I've worked with just the weirdest off the walls breweries, and we find our niche. We find our
Mm.
people.
That's one thing I was going to ask, right? So you talk about, finding your story in North Star, the brand messages, the brand tone, but how much of that do you need to sense check about it's going to resonate with, like, for example, my local market,
Mhm.
or there's actually a brewery who are just, X amount of yards or miles down the road, and they're kind of saying a similar thing? Because is there potential that you're setting yourself up for failure by not really taking into account the broader areas of what needs to be considered and just focusing a little bit too much on what you might be passionate about?
Oh, absolutely. And I mean, I think that goes back to earlier of you have to have the passion and the business. When you check things against your value, and that's why I said you need to be authentic, it's not just about what I as a person want. This is what your story is, which has to go to the community. So with that, you have to open yourself up. So that's not ignoring the fact that, everyone is wanting a lager right now. But if that's not your jam, figure out how you can integrate it so that it is. Maybe it's just throwing a fun name on it. Maybe you have a theme brewery and it's, well, this isn't my favorite, but how do I check this? Now, for instance, non-alcoholic beverages. If there's a certain kind, like seltzers, that you're like, this is so easy to make, the overhead's so low, profits high in comparison, if you're like, I absolutely though cannot make this work, don't. You're allowed to say there's no way I can fit this in.
Mm,
But again, if you're looking at the wider market and you're saying, I'm seeing a demand for this, when you check it against that brand voice, there is a way to make it work where it's still authentic to you. It might not be your favorite thing, but we don't always get to just have our favorite things. But there is a way that we can do this that it's still us. Like I said, maybe it's a lager with a twist. Maybe we add in a unique ingredient. Maybe we use a story to kind of tie it in. Like, oh, I don't like IPAs because it reminds me of my grandmother's fir tree, and when I was a kid this happened and it scarred me for life, and every time I smell even the pine scented like car hangy tags, like I'm transport. You can add that in and just,
mm.
like I said with the brew day story, like there is a way to tie in something that isn't necessarily your favorite thing and still make it you. And it's like, maybe your consumers want more consumer facing events. Maybe you're not all about the birthday parties and the this, that, the other thing. That's fine. Figure out an event that speaks to you, like Metal Day, that your consumers can come. Maybe it's we have live music and sometimes it's a country band and maybe I don't like country, but that's how I get the metal day or that's how I get the records day. And there's also ways to kind of invite people in through those events, right? Like it might not be your favorite thing, but kind of figure out how that tells your brand voice. So if it's a trivia night and you're not the biggest fan of trivia, fine, but make it themed trivia that you like.
Mm.
Or I mean, sometimes we do have to suck it up, you know? Maybe sometimes it's like, I don't love trivia, but it doesn't go against my brand voice, and I get to do everything else I wanna do, so we'll work it in. Or maybe you don't like book club because you don't like the fact that they come in and they take this big group up, and maybe they'll order a bottle of wine, and they'll sit there for 5 hours and order nothing else. Well, a couple breweries that I've worked with have started silent book clubs. You sit by yourself, you order your own thing, but you get to read in silence together. And that's worked for them. You know, so it's about getting creative within what you have to do. Again, when
Mm.
you find that bridge between passion and business, that's your sweet spot. It's about asking yourself, what do I have to do, and what am I not willing to compromise?
I like that mindset. That kind of, yeah, this is happening, but how do I shift it in a way that makes sense, feels good for the brewery, right? So, okay, I've got to try and think about how we start to wrap this up, or else we're going to chat for hours, dude. But I really love this conversation. We're going to have to chat again. Um, but I suppose on that topic of mindset shift, then, eh, what what's like that one thing that brewery owners and brewers need to start thinking about so they kind of think like a brand instead of a beer creator or producer?
Yeah, so I think it's that second part to the why do I care? It's why should they? It's taking who you are and not changing it, but packaging it in a way that's accessible to your consumer. So it's not, oh, well, I love these super hard, recipe beers, and this is what I do. It's how do you then make it accessible? And so that is the education to your staff. That is the social media. That is all the things of figuring out what are they asking for? What do I want to deliver? And what is that pipeline? But changing your mindset of it's not just about them. It's not just about making money, but it's also not just about me. It's not just about what I want. And figuring out how to mesh the two. Again, it's just that bridge. I think so many people get in their own head. You know, they get started of I'm so excited. I get like this is mine. This is my beer. This is my place, and then they get burnt out because they don't know how to make that bridge. They don't know how to cross that bridge. And then they turn to, well, I'm burnt out. I guess I just need to keep the lights on. I'll just keep it business. Or I'll just bring in somebody to tell me how to run my business. And now I'm going to get dispassionate. I'm going to get burnt out. I'm just going to take a step back. You know, it can't be the either or. It has to be that healthy mindset of I'm taking care of myself by continuing to do what I love, but I'm taking care of my community, I'm taking care of my staff by making sure that I'm creating an environment and a business strategy that works.
Mm.
And again, you can be creative with that. You can be authentic with that. In fact, I recommend it. But it's that mindset shift of asking that double-edged question of not just why do I care, why do they care, but both, you know, and
Mm.
making that jump. Again, I mean, it's with the bacon example. We just started off with why did we care? But then when we put it through that brand filter, the brand voice is like, oh, well, they should care because they like food. They like brunch. We're serving brunch. We are filling that need. Come share this like amazing smelling and tasting bacon with us. It doesn't have to be that simple, but it also doesn't have to be more complex than that. But again, if you're asking yourself those two questions, if that's your mindset of I'm going to kind of fill in that middle ground, and that's where I'm going to be is that bridge, and then you run it through your brand filter. I mean, those steps in and of themselves are going to totally flip the way, or could totally flip the way that you do your business. And then you know that you're not only being authentic to yourself, but you're being authentic and accessible to your community. You're listening to them, but you're also listening to yourself. And where that marriage happens, like that's the magic.
Amazing. Okay, one last question then. So, because I can see that process being really helpful to do at the very, very beginning of your brewery journey, but you're going to have brewers who are just about, they're getting through. Maybe they're not disillusioned, maybe they're not upset and thinking of bringing someone else in and they'll just sit on the sidelines right now. But they've got to that interesting point where they've got a bit of an audience, they've got a bit of a social reach, they've got foot traffic, they've got people in the tap room, but they're going, we could do so much more. How do they inject what you're talking about, like harness that passion, turbocharge it, and help the brewery to grow without losing what they've achieved already?
I mean, the simple answer is ask. Ask your consumers, ask your staff. Being willing to say, like, yes, I'm being authentic, but I'm not up here by myself. Like, the success is not solely because of me, it's because of my consumers, it's because of my staff. Like, that is not only going to help you, it's going to keep you from being burnt out, but it's going to bring in your consumer, it's going to bring in your staff. They're going to feel more of your story and they're going to be compelled to make that story a good one. When you ask for that feedback, most people will give it. A lot of people, unfortunately, don't give good feedback on their own. We all know that they're more than willing to give bad feedback sometimes. But when you ask, you'd be really surprised. Even if it's really like, what more do you want to see on social media? Do you want to see more of our food? Do you want to see more videos of when we have music? Do you, XYZ? People will show up with their opinions. That is one thing that this industry and really just communities in general are not short of is opinions. So when you take those in, that also again lets you filter it through the brand voice and go, okay, what can we use here? What makes sense and what rings true with what we're already doing? What do we see that's working? It also gives you a chance to step back and go, okay, we've got momentum. Something is clearly working. Something is clearly resonating. But what isn't working? Where do we have areas of improvement? I don't believe anybody that calls themselves an expert. I don't believe in anybody that's like, we have the best business that there is, and there is no way we could improve. Y'all are liars. So if you constantly are checking yourself, not in a failure way, not in a, I have to be better. Why am I not better? But in a, I'm already like absolutely rocking this. How can I be better? How can I create a better story? That's something you should be doing anyway. So when you're starting to feel that momentum, that is a good time, the best time to be like, okay, I can be better. Let's rock and roll this. Like, let's get everybody involved. And again, not that you take all those opinions, but you involve them in the story. You make everyone feel heard, listened to, seen, and then you put that through your brand voice. They're now part of your story, but you're telling that story in an even now more authentic way because you have brought the right people in, you've brought the right voices in, and then you filtered it through your own. So again, I know it sounds so easy, and we all know that in execution it's not. But if you're checking in with yourself, if you have checked in with your staff, whom hopefully you have interviewed through that brand voice, so now they're the good storytellers, they're going to tell you like, hey, here's a great idea to tell our story, or here's how I'm experiencing our story. You can tell there are different viewpoints to every story. You can start telling those different viewpoints and kind of launch yourself in a different direction that you never even thought possible because you open yourself up to that in a way that was still authentic.
Very, very awesome. Thank you, Amanda, for sharing so much gold with us this afternoon. This has been amazing, bud. And like I mentioned earlier on, I could talk to you for hours, but
Likewise.
it's better to bank it for another day ultimately. Then we make more shows, dude. If people love the cut of your jib, they love what you're talking about, they want to pick your brains, they want to know more about, ultimately, finding their story in the way that you help them to do that, where can they get in touch? Where can they follow your work?
Yeah, so I am aleadvised, ALE advised at gmail.com, aleadvised.com, or on Facebook and Instagram at aleadvised. I try to keep it very easy.
Nice and consistent. I love it. Well, once again, Amanda, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. Everyone who's listening in right now, who's tuned into the live, or indeed listening to it later on, wherever you are, whatever you're doing, you all rock. The brand weaver loves you. And I'll see you next time, friends. Ciao, ciao.